All right, heads up, the bell's going to ring, so just bear with that. I will pause. So in this page, we will cover adding. The back is subtracting fractions. And the main thing you need to remember is that when you add or subtract fractions, you need a common denominator. So, this is where, for instance, you start listing the multiples of 3 and 6. So 3 times 1, 3 times 2, 3 times 3. 3 times 4, the multiples of 6, 6 times 1, 6 times 2, 6 times 3, until I find the smallest or the least number they have in common. So some of you don't need to do that, but that's where I'm getting the 6 from. So once I've established that the least common denominator between these two fractions is 6, I'm going to change the fractions so that they're the same. So this fraction's good to go, but what I will do with this fraction is multiply the bottom by 2 and the top by 2. So the fraction now becomes 16 over 6, adding to 1 over 6, and then when I'm done adding, I get 17 over 6. I actually don't add the denominator, just the numerators. So for instance, if you go to number 4, the least common multiple, again, you can start listing multiples of 7 if you need to. You also have a multiplication table, and then you can list multiples of 5 until you find the first number that they have in common. So eventually we'll see that it's 35. That will be the least common multiple. So to make this a 5, I'll multiply the bottom by, to make this a 35, I'll multiply the bottom by 5, which means I'll multiply the top by 5. And to make this 35, I'll multiply the bottom by 7, which means I'll multiply the top by 7. So the fractions become 25 over 35, that's the first fraction, and the other fraction becomes 7 over 35. And then when I add them up, I'll have 32 over 35. Okay? Number 8, just an FYI, you should make that denominator a 1. And then when you go to the back, same idea. So let's do number 12. I'm going to put this over 1. My least common denominator between 1 and 5 is 5, so this one's good to go. But what I'm going to do to make this one a 5 is multiply this by 5 and this by 5. So I'll now have the fraction of 10 over 5 minus 8 over 5, and when I'm done I get 2 over 5. And that's your adding and subtracting fractions.